From Pocketnow.com, this is Pocketnow Weekly. Hello, and welcome to episode 003 of the Pocketnow Weekly, the once-a-week podcast from Pocketnow.com, where we discuss news and opinion from the world of mobile technology. That's smartphones, tablets, phablets, and everything in between. I'm your host, Michael Fisher, contributing editor at Pocketnow, and I'm joined, as always, by our managing editor, Anton. Good afternoon to you.
Good morning, and it's refreshing for the first time recording this podcast. It's not midnight here in Europe, so I'm finally drinking coffee at 6 p.m. instead of midnight. But it's good to be here. Hi, everybody.
I'm very glad you are, and also our editor-in-chief, Brandon Meneman. Good morning to you, sir.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We are, as Tony mentioned, we are recording at a slightly different time today. So it's been a lot of fun to try and get everything together, but we are on a bit of a time crunch, so I kind of want to just jump right into this. But before we get to our topics, I want to talk about the podcast. I want to have a little meta moment. We're on episode 003, which always sounds awkward when I'm leading into the show, but I want to make sure we at least have 100 episodes before we do something different here. So that's why that's a thing that I'm stuck on. But we're still very much in the optimization phase. And I just wanted to kind of communicate with our listeners very, very briefly and say, we're still working out technical stuff. I mean, we're still working out levels and equalization and things about that. I think we've got our distribution pretty much settled. We're now officially in the Zune store. Is that correct, Tony?
Everybody can just go on the Zune client, search for Pocketnow, either on their phone or on their PC or Macs, and subscribe to the podcast. It's there. It's the Pocketnow Weekly, but the old podcast is also there if you want to just listen back in time just to see how we sounded.
Listening. Yeah. It's great. So we're on all three kind of official channels, iTunes and Zune, and I believe Google Listen has finally crawled us. So distribution is settled, but, we're still working on audio stuff. My levels are still being tweaked because I'm recording in a sound booth that everyone knows about. And, I made my living doing voiceover for 4 years, so it's really ironic that I'm the one with the levels problems on all of our podcasts. But it's because of the equipment I'm using. I just want to touch on briefly also something. We've gotten a lot of feedback already in the podcast, and a lot of it has been positive, and it's been really great. But we've had a lot of suggestions to do a video podcast. That is something that we may do in the future, in the distant future, but we have no plans to do it right now. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I know this is kind of get a lot of people angry or, why. We'll do it when the time is right and when we can accomplish it properly. We really like, I certainly really like a lot of other sites' podcasts, but I really only listen to them because when I watch them, I usually find that I'm just watching as kind of a split screen of a bunch of people kind of statically staring at the monitor.
There's really no added value when it's cool to see the person, but it's just almost you might as well take a picture of each person and put it in the different frames and just stare at their face because it's the same thing.
Exactly, for an hour and a half. And while, pets and sisters and parents are walking by in the background or whatever, and it's like, if we can do it right, like if we all someday end up in the same city, we have a studio, something like that, who knows what the future holds. Like that's something where we could do something different. Or if we get Jaime in on the discussion, we start talking about, a really cool, different multimedia approach, something that nobody's done, we'll do it that way. But we're just not going to do that right now. We're not going to be these kind of talking heads on the screen. So we, for those of you who are annoyed by that, we do apologize. But that's just where we're at right now. So I wanted to make sure we touch on that. So anyway, that being said, let's jump right in here.
Wait 1 sec.
Yeah,
Wait
please.
1 sec. I've got something to say.
Oh, Brandon has something to say. I got to give you a corner at the top of the show, man.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
All right.
So I've been using my Android phone in a way that I think a lot of people don't realize they can do with their own Android phone. It turns out, and this might be common knowledge. I don't think it is. You can run legacy console games on your phone. I'm talking NES 8, Super NES, Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, and it's very easy to do. Just the other day, I downloaded an NES emulator for free from the Google Play Store. It's called John, John, NES Lite, and the idea behind this, of course, to keep it legal, is that you have to own the game or have paid for it in the past in order to play it. And there are websites out there that feature ROMs that you can download and load onto your phone. And it's literally the easiest thing I've ever done on my Android phone. And within moments, I was playing Mario Brothers 1, the first video game I ever played when I was like 6 years old. And I was just zipping through these levels. It had multi-touch, so it, obviously you lack the tactile feedback, although some Android devices let you control a gamepad, which is, oh my gosh, that would be so cool.
That would be amazing, yeah.
But even the on-screen controls are pretty good. So there is an emulator out there for every game system, and if you've purchased the games previously, you can load on literally every or any game that you've ever played. So it's like the reincarnation of those old school platforms or consoles.
And you're not the only one who's done this. I've had an emulator called NESem, I guess, NESEM, on my Galaxy Nexus, and before that I think it was on my Evo. And I do the same thing. And I've got a Super NES emulator too, so I'll play like Mario Kart. But how does that work with the ROMs? Is that just like the honor system kind of thing where you're saying like you have to have paid for the game in the past, like you have to have bought the cartridge as a kid? Like, I mean, because securing the ROMs isn't too hard, It's the same theory behind making a backup. Like if you've purchased a CD, remember a compact disc? Some listeners might not know what that is. Physical media, how strange.
Yeah, you're legally entitled to a copy or two, or I don't know what the number is, of that, as long as you've purchased it for the first time, and you're allowed to use it for personal use. You can't sell it, obviously, and the same applies. Last I checked, to video games. If you've purchased it, you can essentially download the ROM, which is like a copy for personal use. So last I checked, it was perfectly legal, given those circumstances.
We should look that up. That's actually really, really, really cool. Thank you for reminding me that I have that. Did you have Nintendo of any kind over there in Romania, Tony?
No, at least not when I was at the age of playing, because as you know, or probably some of you listeners don't know, Romania was a communist country up until 1989. At that time, I was 9 years old, and it took a couple of years for Romania to start to think or to head in a capitalist way, in a democratic way. So no, the market was not filled with gadgets so that kids could drive their parents nuts.
Sometimes I forget about that. Thank you for the reminder. It's so interesting to get that perspective every now and then, particularly when we talk about you getting devices and stuff like that, and how the process is so different for you to get review devices than it is for either Brandon or me. But at any rate, so jumping into to using that as a kind of a leap to jump into Android here, I started my day going to the post office, which, by the way, is one of the more infuriating things I think you can do.
I don't like that place.
No, it really is horrible. As a technology person, especially, where you're so used to kind of convenience without people, this notion of humans being kind of superfluous to efficiency or detrimental to efficiency. And, anyway, it was a fine morning at the post office, but I don't want to talk about the post office. The point is, I was there so I could send out our giveaway phone to our giveaway winner. Yes. We closed the Samsung Galaxy S3 giveaway. We had a winner from Pennsylvania in the United States. Her name was Ashley, and so her phone is on her way to her at her dorm. I think she's in college. So it was awesome. It was just a really cool way to kick off the day. I've never given away a phone before personally. It wasn't my phone to give away. Obviously, it was Pocketnow's, but I was in charge of the giveaway, so that was so much fun.
We should get her on the podcast when she receives the phone.
That'd be awesome.
Really cool idea. Yeah,
that is awesome.
Look at this. We got ideas and things. Cool. Well, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to say that that contest was very much fun. It would be great to do more of that in the future. I'm sure we will. Obviously, it's not something we can do all the time. I want to talk a little bit later about the dynamics of running a giveaway. And maybe not on this episode, but on another one. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. Some of the methodology we used to pick the winner was fun, because I've never worked with a random number generator before. that's how we kind of selected the winner from the qualified submissions we received. And there were over 1,300 of those, by the way. They're still sitting in my inbox, so every time I go to my Pocketnow mail account, it says 1334, which is crazy.
Like somebody's writing you emails.
Exactly, right, like somebody wants to talk to me. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. And keeping with the Android thread, the Nexus 7, I got a device. I got a device in the mail, and it was my Nexus 7, and it's sitting right next to me here. And I don't think I've told Brandon that yet. So, yeah, it came. And I am one of the lucky ones to have received a 16-gig Nexus 7 before it sold out.
You got the last one.
I got the last one. Yeah, before the store was cleaned out. That's kind of really cool. I'm going to talk about how I love my Nexus 7 at some point in the future, not now. But the news right now is that still, as of just a few minutes ago, you go to the Google Play Store, you try and buy a Nexus 7 at 16 gigs, and it is sold out. You can get an email notification when it comes back in stock. Are either of you guys surprised by this? I mean, I feel like almost that maybe this was a planned thing, that they made a limited quantity for this reason.
I think that they expected people to grab the lower price, but then people quickly realized that 8 gigabytes is not enough. In fact, the unit that I have is 8 gigabytes, and I was thinking, oh, it'll be enough. I'm not going to put media on here. I'll stream everything. And then one day I go to update my Facebook app, and I ran out of storage and thus could not update my Facebook app, which is like, I'm like, wait, is this 2012? I've run out of storage. What is this? And the reason was because I had several 700 megabyte games that I was testing during the review, like Shadowgun and such. So I had to go through with an axe and remove all of those awesome games. So yeah, 16 gig is the way to go, and I think that a lot of people realize that. And when people think Android tablet, they're like, oh, $400 or $500. And so when they thought, when they looked at the Nexus 7 pricing, they said, well, $250 is still quite good, and I'll get that extra storage. So there was huge demand for it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I have been burned by that storage thing so often. I mean, you never, ever, ever think you're going to use as much storage as you actually will. I'm sitting here I'm using my MacBook Air to do this podcast outline, and it's like I frequently, routinely have to delete stuff just so the thing will function without giving me notifications that I'm losing space on my boot drive. So it's I could never even think about going with an 8 gigabyte tablet.
It's such a big decision when there's not removable storage.
Yes.
Like it's funny you mentioned your laptop, Michael. My desktop computer, I have a 128 gigabyte solid state drive as my primary, and I run out weekly, and it's really frustrating. When I bought it, I was thinking, there's no way I'll ever come up. I don't, I store media on a secondary hard drive, and I was like, there's no way I'll ever max out the capacity, and I've done it.
Yeah.
And then with the iPad, when I had the 16 gig, I would download like 2 or 3 movies, and it'd say, "Oops, that the capacity is full," and I'd be very upset. So I think the lesson here is that if you cannot change the storage, pretend like you need a lot, and pay the slight premium for the higher capacity model, because you probably will run out.
Agreed. I mean, it's just like anything else. It's like you spend a little bit extra money up front to be happier for a longer period or more happy in the long run. And storage is, I guess, like the prototypical example of that.
Of course, if you're going to buy a Galaxy S3 and you're choosing between 8, 16, or what is it? Actually, it's 16, 32, and 64 gigabyte. Go with the smaller capacity because you can
get a memory card slot in it, right?
Get a memory card, which is far less expensive than upgrading to the higher capacity built-in model. So.
Yeah, what do you work at? Tony, your daily driver, what's your capacity on that, whichever it is?
Well, I'm about the only person I know who doesn't run out of space, and I'm about the only person I know who finds it enough to have 8 gigs of space, of storage space. To get back to the example of the MacBook, I had the 256 gig version. I have 230 free. On my X PC, I had a 32 gig SSD before I sold it, and I still had 15 gigs free. My iPhone is completely empty, so I'm not I don't have that many MP3s or music or videos or games. I'm not playing games at all. So for me, 8 gigs is more than enough. So this is why I have no opinion on this. Just to answer your question, I don't find it surprising at all. I think they produced about the same amounts of 16 gig and 8 gig version of the Nexus 7. It's just that people need more storage, because as I listen to you guys, you have lots of multimedia content and lots of things, of stuff on your devices. Just like Jaime showed me in Barcelona, his 64 gig iPhone was almost full, and my 16 gig iPhone still had 14 gigs free. So it's just a matter of perspective on how you're using your storage, how you're used to playing. For instance, I have relatively cheap and fast internet in Romania, so I don't have any music files on my iPhone and iPad because I'm streaming from the cloud.
That's interesting, because there's sort of two divergent futures and they're kind of competing with each other. One where everything is streamed thanks to the wide availability of fast bandwidth and cheap bandwidth, and then the other, and you see that with Spotify and Netflix and the success of those services, and even Zune, which has a really cool unlimited download streaming thingy.
Right.
And then there is the other part of that, which is, you're going to download everything, and Google Play is download everything. They don't have a streaming option, and iTunes is kind of split. You can stream from Apple TV movies, but then if you have an iPhone, you download songs, you download movies, you download everything. So where do you guys think the future is going in terms of the split between downloading and streaming?
I'll tell you. I mean, I'll jump right in here, because I have been trying to use streaming-only services for the past week or so, because I've been reviewing a couple phones at once, and I haven't been swapping my memory card very often, so I find myself out with a review unit, and I don't have my music on it, so I'm like, well, crap. So I'll fire up Spotify, whose new app works pretty well, and I'll start streaming. It is. But I'll start streaming until I have a network problem. Even on LTE, sometimes it can't handle, I can't keep up with the rate that is required for some of these songs. And that is especially true in the subway system here, which does not offer ubiquitous coverage. So I am in a situation where I'm in a very, obviously a pretty advanced city, full of technology firms and young people who value technology. So I'm in pretty much the best environment possible, yet I cannot exist as a streaming-only, consumer. I need to have local storage. So I think that the future is heavily streaming-based, but I think we're nowhere close to that yet, especially when that's true for me in Boston. And, it's got to be true for somebody in Des Moines,
Yeah, and for me, I have a slightly different existence than you. I never, ever take the subway. And the only time where I lose service completely is on a plane, and I don't fly too much. Mm-hmm. But for me, what happens is that, for example, I'm in my neighborhood where literally 50% of my neighborhood is LTE, 50% is 3G. And sometimes I take a walk around my neighborhood and I plug into Spotify and I'm listening. And not only do I lose the stream, which is incredibly annoying when you're about to get to a climax of a song and then it stops. Not only do I lose the stream when I'm transitioning from 3G to LTE in a lot of cases, but when I step down to 3G and I'm in the part of the neighborhood that has 3G only, it stutters a lot, and it's really frustrating. So I think another problem there is the ubiquity of higher speed networks isn't there yet. It's a lot better. And they need to get some cell phone towers in those subway stations.
Completely agreed. But also, I feel like it's an app architecture thing too, because, and this is not conclusive. This is just me riffing here, but I find that Spotify will skip more often than Pandora will, for example. Like Pandora, for me,
has a good buffer.
A very, very good buffer, and it's handling that stream with much more alacrity than even the new Spotify app. So I feel like there's an app architecture question that is that requires some investigation there. So
I can't tell you my opinion because I really don't have one. I mean, I do have one, but it's not going to be the same as yours, which means I disagree.
That's good. Please disagree.
The thing is, I have Spotify set to extreme quality in streaming on my iPad or on my iPhone or even on my Android phones, and I'm really thankful that I live in a region where I have very, very cheap and high-speed internet. I will, however, put some offline content on my devices whenever I will go, for instance, next month to Berlin to avoid some huge roaming costs. But as far as I'm concerned, whenever I'm in my hometown or in my home country, I don't need local storage. Basically, I can lose my laptop, my phone, my tablet, and I will only be regretting the hardware itself. All my data is safe, it's online, and I can pick up a new phone and continue where I left off.
Now that is interesting. Are you blanketed by HSPA in your hometown, Tony? In and around?
Yes, we have advertised 7.2 megabits per second, but it averages in at around 3.5, anywhere up to 5. So I never peaked out.
Okay. Well, cool. Since you mentioned tablet, I'll just drop this in right now. Since I've spent about 2 days with the Nexus 7 now, I may have to eat my words at some point in the future. When I said that I found your idea, Tony, of carrying around a 7-inch tablet as a phone ridiculous, I still think it's ridiculous. I do, but it is less ridiculous now because I've now laid hands on this device and put it in my cargo pocket and things like that. So anyway.
When I got the original Galaxy Tab, which was about the same size as the Galaxy or the Nexus 7, it was the winter time, and so I was wearing a jacket, and inside there was a jacket pocket. And for about a week, I thought I was super geeky. It had 3G, so I was able to access the internet. I would take it around with me everywhere, and I would be waiting in line at various places. I'd take out this tablet, and at some point I started to think, I could achieve the same results here, meaning having a big screened experience, if I just bring around my smartphone. It's not, I just need to hold it closer to my face and effectively have a bigger screen, right?
Right. That's the way physics works, right?
Perspective.
Yeah. Are you talking about the original Galaxy Tab?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I remember being at the coming out party for that thing. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk more about that in a while. We got to. But I've been carrying around the Nexus 7 all around town. I'm doing the same thing that you did. So I'm waiting for the buzz to wear off. I'm waiting for the love to cave in. In another sales-related news, and still on Android, the Galaxy S3 has passed 10 million units sold. Tony, I don't know was it you who wrote this one? Is this?
It was me.
Okay, so this may mean shipped to carrier partners, or it may mean actually sold.
Actually, units sold.
It is actually units sold. Yeah. So, and they were projecting. There's a related story, which is the first one attached to this piece. Samsung was expecting to sell 10 million Galaxy S3 units in July. So it looks like they've done just that. Is anyone really surprised by this? I mean, it's pretty phenomenal, but I'm not surprised. It's a great phone, and it's had a lot of buzz to it.
There's so much marketing dollars behind this thing combined. I mean, there's so many stakeholders in the Galaxy S3, and usually companies when they collaborate on something like Verizon, Samsung, or Microsoft and Nokia, they share the advertising budget. So you get this compounding effect where there's just so many ad dollars. You go to any website on the internet right now, any tech website, you'll probably see a Galaxy S3 ad. You see them on billboards, on TV soon, and that starts to change. Advertising's effective when there are good ads, and so people are buying this thing. People know about this thing. In fact, I was talking to a few non-technical friends the other day, and they say, "What phone are you using?" I say, "The Galaxy S3." They're like, "Oh, I know about that," which is very surprising that such a new phone it has that recognition.
Very,
so it's working.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm actually wearing for this podcast a Galaxy S3 T-shirt. That I got at the launch event. That is a complete accident, but I'm just realizing it now. There's a lot of swag out there. There's a lot of stuff that is branded Galaxy S3, and even though people don't always get the name right, I feel like I've mentioned this before. I'll be like, yeah, what Android phone are you thinking of upgrading to if you're sticking with Android? And they'll be like, oh, the Galaxy. I'm like, okay, well, which one do you mean? And they'll in the past couple of weeks they've been pointing out the Galaxy S3 when I bring it out. I'm like, oh, the 3. But I feel like that's enough of a coup that Samsung has really gotten the word Galaxy, the brand Galaxy, into people's heads. But speaking of that same device, you, Brandon, have run a build of, what is it, CyanogenMod 10 on your Galaxy S3?
Yes, I think last podcast I was fantasizing about what that would be like.
Yeah, and that came true for you pretty quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, and Geez, I'm not. I actually switched back to the Galaxy Nexus, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But it's been awesome. I'm using the quad-core version, and web browsing is ridiculously fast.
Saw that on the video, yes.
And at first, it's actually kind of funny. When I first put the CyanogenMod 10 preview on my Galaxy S3, everything was working except the phone. And people thought that was kind of funny because, you know, they'd call me and they couldn't hear me. And, you know, for me, it was kind of worth it because, I can just text them later. But they fixed the phone issue. The only thing that doesn't work now, I think, is that the camera sometimes doesn't work. But, you know, who needs that anyway?
Even with two cameras, camera icons, right?
Yeah, it's got two camera icons because some of the time one works and some of the time the other one works. But it's good enough to use as a daily driver. In fact, it's made it the fastest phone I've ever used, bar none. I think yesterday I found a tweak on XDA to disable the capacitive buttons and give you the Galaxy Nexus like on-screen.
The soft keys?
The soft keys. And that's interesting because, you know, the screen on the Galaxy S3 is so big you can afford to give away some pixels to the on-screen controls. But some people kind of don't like the capacitive buttons. And you get the back button on the right side instead of the left. Yeah. And then you don't get the permanent multitask button, so you have to tap and hold. So I kind of liked it a lot, except the problem was that it had a lot of side effects. So I had to reverse that, and that's not quite ready for prime time. But yes, CyanogenMod 10 on the Galaxy S3. If you're rooted out there, it is awesome, and it is fast, real fast.
It is good to hear that ringing endorsement. I mean, I always think it's odd to see a stock build or a close to stock build of Android, such as CyanogenMod 9 or in this case 10, on a device that you frequently see or only see officially with a skin on it. So I always think that that's kind of this weird. There's this weird disconnect that goes on in my mind where I'm like, oh, that's a Galaxy S3. Where's TouchWiz? Oh, it's running something awesome. And I'm perhaps predictably not going to be doing that because I like TouchWiz. Oddly enough, the new TouchWiz. But I was really glad to see that video when I was seeing what's gone on the past week. And they're fast. That team will make, you know, they'll build new stuff. What is it, the nightlies that come out every day?
Yeah, and that's also interesting because every day there's a new build, and you're like, oh, should I flash it? And if you flash it, you know, and you just wipe your Dalvik cache, you can basically put the new system on the new files on top of the existing, so you don't have to start all over. But then you've
it's like a Delta update almost?
Yeah, it is. It does work like that. The best case scenario is that you wipe your device completely, which, you know, I would plan to do every month or so because there are, you know, so many nightlies and they're usually minor updates, but it's good to get a fresh start once in a while. But, you know, I'm kind of new to the nightly build thing, and I kind of, there's like a change log, and I can kind of see what has been changed if it's worthwhile, and sometimes I'll wait 3 days, sometimes I'll do it every night. It's kind of fun. So it's an interesting concept, these nightlies.
Is there an equivalent thing? Tony, you just finished reviewing the PureView 808, which is up on our site as of right now. Is there an equivalent kind of modding community for Symbian? I know nothing about Symbian because it's been so absent from the United States.
I don't know, and I'll tell you why. Ever since I started reviewing phones, obviously when us editors or reviewers are taking a look at a phone, we are taking a look at the out-of-the-box experience. How does that phone behave the way the OEM, the manufacturer, intended it to? And throughout the years, I've gotten so used to only working with the stock experience that somehow along the way, I lost the need completely to flash, to customize, to deep tweak. And I'm not afraid to tell you this. I'm using all of my phones in their stock setup, whether it's Windows Phone, Symbian, Apple, Android, everything is out of the box. And if that means OEM update 1 year from now, then that it is.
Wow. I actually am surprised to hear that. Because I'm in the same boat, you know, and we talked about this last week as well, and I think, you know, Brandon, I could feel Brandon's open sneer on the other side of his microphone. But like, Tony, you're like, you were the one who gave me a hard time about not rooting my Galaxy Nexus.
Do it like I do it.
What?
don't do what I do.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly. The thing is that, I don't need to have something which is faster, because the Galaxy S3 is fast and is enough for me. And that, I don't know, 0.2 of a second, I don't see it. And I don't mind if I push the home button and it takes me 1 second to get back to the home screen. I'm not that of a geek, for instance, as Brandon is. No hard feelings here. But the thing is that, I'm stuck. And you know what's my happiest moment of the day? When I run out of battery on one of my phones, and I'm just picking another phone up from the desk, random one, and I'm just continuing to do whatever I did on the other phone, because everything is set up the same way on all of my devices, even the icons on my home screen. And if I were to completely flash, continuously tweak and do stuff, that would be meaning for me basically not using the phone. I would be basically only flashing and not using the phone for emails, for stuff like this. I had a discussion, I think it was last year, or when I think it was on the podcast, that, and I think I'm going to write an editorial about this. We are not using their phones for what they are intended to. We are, and of course it will be a polarizing topic, but we basically, power users, geeks, all they do on their phones is just applications, tweaking, extreme tweaking, and flashing. There was an interesting research done 3 or 4 weeks ago. O2 in the UK told us that basically making phone calls and sending text messages is only the 5th or the 6th thing which people do on their phones.
Yeah.
These are phones. Yes, they can run applications, but you don't spend your entire life in Word, in Excel, in a game, on Twitter, or on Facebook. A phone is for phone calls. And the addition of running applications is something which should improve your mobile life. But right now we're kind of lost in our phones, if that does make any sense.
Well, yeah, but it seems to me, though, weren't you referencing that story that said that like phone calls and texts were like did you just say that like the 5th or 6th most common thing we do? Like they're not at the top of the list, right?
And from what I've seen, people make phone calls at around 7-8 minutes per day. And this we can also refer to your editorial where you talked about texting instead of talking. Yeah, you know what? It depends from person to person. I would rather talk to somebody than write to somebody. So yeah, for me, a phone is a phone, and the fact that it can run applications makes my life easier, but I'm not lost within my phone.
See, I get that completely. I think we have to keep our eye on first of all, you make a really good point about having to keep our eye on the ball as far as regular consumers are concerned, and we don't see phones the same way as kind of the average Joe, and we kind of have to, for the purposes of reviews, kind of put those glasses on and be like, okay, I need to now look at this from the point of view of an average consumer. But that said, even the average consumer like stuff is moving away from voice, and it's moving away from this kind of this is a phone and a phone first mentality, which I'm really not sad about, because obviously because of our divergent views on voice calls. But I feel like that, and that study bears that out, where it's like, yeah, voice calls just a few years ago were king, and now they're just another accessory, and they're less important than even apps. It's why people can walk around with custom ROMs, like Brandon was just saying, and it's like, well, the phone application doesn't work. And that's not a deal breaker, because that's not what I use my phone for. It's a pocket computer now instead of just a phone.
Yeah, there are people who care about that increase of speed, that point something of a second, which makes the difference from instant to almost instant. And then there are the people who don't really care or don't really notice, or don't really know how to do it.
And we can all, we're all coming at this from different spots, and that's one of the great things about this business. I feel like my father will often ask me the same question about writing for Pocketnow or for tech sites in general. He'll be like, "Well, is there enough? I just can't imagine there's enough to talk about." And I'm like, "No, Dad, this is such a massive landscape. There's so much going on every day. There's so much new happening, and so much to consider about the old that's happening or that's not happening anymore. That, I mean, and there's room for all kinds of views here. That's why I feel like we're a pretty good mix here on the podcast. We have all levels of geekitude at different fronts. So, but moving on, I want to I want to just throw a mention here while we're talking about Jelly Bean that the Galaxy S3 and S2 are rumored to get Jelly Bean soon.
The official versions, of course.
Right, exactly. Yes, the official versions, the non-cyanogen jobs. I think that in light of the fact that HTC just released a list where they basically torpedoed any notion of Android updates for a couple models, I think that's really, really reinforcing Samsung's position as not just a bringer of new products, but as a, like maybe a customer service improvement on their end. I don't know.
I agree.
What do you think? Yeah,
I think it's I think that gesture is a lot bigger than it appears on the surface, because what I picture is a company that cares so much about their flagship line and their previous flagship that they've rallied. No, that's not the right word. They've devoted tremendous resources. They probably have maybe 100 engineers or 50 engineers allocated just to getting the customers the latest version of the Android operating system, which will make the customers feel tremendously valued. And the fact that they're going to pull it off in such a short period of time, that's amazing. And that makes me want to buy a Samsung product in the future, because I'm going to get updates sooner than HTC or LG is going to send out the update.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I was surprised to read it. I mean, I was surprised to read the headline when I just thought it said, Samsung Galaxy S3 to get Android 4.1 soon. But when it said, the addendum that says Galaxy S2 is like, what? A year-old phone is going to get the Jelly Bean update at almost the same time. I mean, that's crazy. That's awesome.
Let's not forget that the Galaxy S2 is still among the top 5 phones in the Android land. So it's an excellent phone. It still outperforms many of the quad-core phones on the market at the moment. And aside from that, let's mention that before the Galaxy S3, the Galaxy S2 was Samsung's best-selling phone. So it's just normal. The two best-selling phones for Samsung are getting the Jelly Bean treatment, and it's just normal. We're talking tens of millions of users here.
That's a really good point, and I feel like that's a good illustration of how easy it is to lose perspective of the global market if you're in the United States. I don't know, Brandon, I won't speak for you. I'm sure you knew about this. The Galaxy S, when it first premiered, the first line in the summer of 2010, I think it was, that was eye-catching to me. But the Galaxy S2 went completely unnoticed by me and most people that I know. Because there were a lot of offerings at the time from they were boring offerings, but HTC had a few, and other companies were bringing stuff out. I mean, I wasn't even cognizant of the Galaxy S2 really here in the States, except insofar as the ridiculous elements were concerned, like Sprint's ridiculously named the Sprint Samsung Galaxy S2 Epic 4G Touch.
That was dirty.
Just to complete your sentence, Samsung is doing a great job now, but this thing has to be said. Samsung did a lousy job in bringing the S2 to the States. I mean, it was launched in 2011 at the IFA in February, and if I recall well, the States got it somewhere in Q3, if I recall well. Anyway, it was at least 4 or 5 months difference between the international and the US launch. But for the Galaxy S3, I don't think it was even a month of a difference. And this is the way they should do it. And I'm glad that they have finally learned from their mistakes and they are listening to customer feedback. At the end of the day, people are dying to put money in their pockets.
Yeah, I think the Galaxy S and the Galaxy S2, especially the 2, was practice for Samsung to basically have control over the carriers, so that when the time was right with the Galaxy S3, they could say, hey, this is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, then you're going to be the only carrier. Without a Galaxy S3, you're going to lose out on a lot of customers.
Agreed.
So I think this is part of the plan, and now they're in this pattern where Galaxy S4 comes out, same thing's going to happen with the 3, and there won't be long, confusing names anymore, and that was probably a nightmare for Samsung marketing, but it's a thing of the past.
Yeah, agreed.
Go on, Michael. Sorry.
Well, I mentioned a bit of that in the piece I wrote called "Samsung is in it to win it," where I was like, "Well, the feel of this launch, this Galaxy S3 push, is different from anything that's come before." And it took Samsung a long time to earn that kind of cachet, that right to say, "No, we're Samsung. This is a Galaxy S product, and you're going to do it our way because it's going to work out best for both of us, and you just need to trust us." And certainly a lot has factored into that. Go ahead, Tony.
That Samsung was so against Apple's policy, and they ended up doing exactly what Apple does. And if you see Apple products, they're the same across carriers. There's no carrier customization. The hardware looks the same. The software is the same. And Samsung is finally achieving that, which speaks highly of them.
Yeah, agreed. And while we're talking about Samsung, just to wrap up Android, this is I just posted the Galaxy Nexus LTE after the Buzz episode, which is the 5th episode of that series. I'm happy to have done so, and I I had a little gaffe in the midst of the video. But, hold on, just to make sure we're on the same page. Tony, you do not have a Galaxy Nexus. Actually, you said that you've handled only one a couple times.
Not own a Galaxy Nexus, and I handled Jaime's Galaxy Nexus when we were in IFA. When we were at the MWC in Barcelona this February.
Okay, and Brandon, you've got the HSPA version, yeah?
Well, Jaime stole my HSPA version, so I'm using the Verizon version.
I handled Brandon's Galaxy Nexus through Jaime.
I see. Okay. Well, I forgot, Brandon, that you were in the same boat I was. I was glad to finally kind of get that off my chest. I really was excited about doing that after the Buzz episode, and the Verizon Galaxy Nexus has just been such a wonderful Android device, and it just would have been a wonderful Android device all around if only they had not marketed it as a Nexus device. I talked about that on the video and yada yada, but at one point on the video I mentioned in error that this was a 1.5-year-old device. The on-screen script I was using said half-a-year-old device, and I just screwed up because I was tired. And I don't know what you guys... I want to hear what people say about you guys on the videos, on all of our video reviews, because it seems like all of us have... Like, there's always commenters who are jerks. There's always commenters who are awesome. But I feel like there are common threads. And the thing that always comes up for me, always, every single video, there's somebody who's going to say it, is that I look high.
So funny.
Every time there's always at least one person who's like, dude, you need to not smoke weed before you do these reviews.
That's because at one point one internet moron stuck that label on your forehead and everybody picked it up and they just keep repeating it. Yeah,
I know. You know, but hold on, here's the thing. I watch the videos, and I as most people know, as I think I've mentioned before, I make a fair amount of my income, my livelihood acting. I do camera acting work as well. I've watched myself before. I shoot my videos here in the booth in pretty horrible lighting conditions with a really awful camera, but I'm also always exhausted because I shoot these videos like early in the morning or late at night, and it's stupid. So I know that I look ridiculous, but it's just hilarious. Like, I can do a countdown every time I post a video. I'm like, okay, the video's going up at 11 a.m. By 11:48, the first person will have come along and said, dude, lay off the toke pipe or what. I just made up a term.
You know what the problem is, Michael? The problem is that they are not looking at a Michael Fisher review. They are looking at a phone review. And that, again, internet morons, and I'm going to keep on saying this until they drop, they will comment on everything. They will comment on your walls, on your T-shirt, on your whatever you have on your desk. They will miss the point. It's about it's a video which is 10 minutes about a phone, and they will comment about one thing: Michael's red eyes, or dude, that guy only has Apple products. Okay, leave that aside. Right, it's not the Apple product review. It's the phone. It's the peer review. It's the whatever.
But it's been. Go ahead, Brandon. I'll make my point in a second.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that the reason why you look under the influence of a substance is because you just happen to have bigger, what's the word, eyelids.
I've larger eyelids. That's going to be the next comment thread, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, you kind of have like, I think Billy Joel actually has similar eyelids where his eyes always look kind of like not 100% open because the eyelids kind of cut. I'm not saying that it's a problem or anything. I'm just trying to figure out why people are saying that you look high all the time.
I love it.
But anyway, I think it's time to move on from this.
Before we do, I do want to mention that when I first started posting videos, I was kind of advised to not worry about the YouTube comments because they tended to be really, really negative. And we've kind of oscillated back and forth between those. I feel like there have been a lot of positive YouTube comments as well, and I like those. But I want to just say that I always say at the end of all my videos, and I think some other people do too, if you want to leave a comment on one of our videos, you should leave it on the post at pocketnow.com, because whether they're good or bad, that's not really the issue. It's just the volume of YouTube comments is so high that if we were to answer all of them, it would just be kind of ridiculous, and we would need like a dedicated person for that, and we don't have that. So,
and one word of warning: if the internet morons come to Pocket Now with their usual comments, I'm gonna make sure they're gonna be banned. So there's moderation on Pocket Now. There's no moderation on YouTube.
We got Tony the guard dog is gonna be like taking care of our comments as usual. And actually, Tony's really great, because I'll come back after a long night or something like that, and I'll just be reading the comments on my articles of the day. And there will be someone who has posted something, nasty or something, and within a few minutes, Tony's has popped up and be like, "Hey, you settle down," and I love that. So thank you for being our guard dog, Tony. I want to move on to Windows Phone. We're coming up on a little time crunch here. There's not a lot going on with Windows Phone in the past week. We did, though, have Nokia's numbers released. Which I kind of want to talk about first. Were you guys surprised at these numbers when Nokia announced that for the second quarter of 2012 they sold 4 million Lumia devices? I was a little surprised, because I didn't think it would be that many. Am I completely off base, or was this? I know they're still losing money like crazy, but was this kind of a surprising win for them in your eyes, Brandon?
It kind of represents Windows Phone's, I guess, market share in general. It's substantial, but it's relatively small. So I think that this number probably was mediocre news for Microsoft and for Nokia. And if it were a lot higher, it could have done a lot of good things for Windows Phone as a platform. And if it were a lot lower, it would seriously call into question the viability of Microsoft's strategy, and certainly Nokia. So, but to answer your question, I think that 4 million was above where I thought it would be.
You too, yeah. I didn't necessarily. I don't know. What about you, Tony? Were you surprised, disappointed, pleased?
No, I'm how to say this. Equidistant, is that a word in English?
You're kind of ambivalent?
Yeah, something like that. I'm looking at the numbers from an objective perspective. Windows Phone on Nokia hardware has been out for like 9 months, I think, last October. And 4 million in 9 months is a low number, considering the Galaxy S3 sold 10 million in 2 months, or even 1 month. And the iPhone is selling like crazy, millions over the weekend. But I think there's the need for a bigger picture here. We need to look at it from another perspective. Nokia has been doubling their quarter-over-quarter numbers. They started off with 1 million in the last quarter of 2011, then 2 million Q1, and now 4 million Q2. As a big picture, considering also the fact that Windows Phone has still a sub 2-digit market share, 4 million is a great number, but let's not forget, it's 4 million worldwide.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's good to keep that in perspective. And at some point I want to do some kind of in-depth analysis of Nokia's kind of cash situation and stuff like that. And this is all business stuff that goes beyond me. And we touched on it last week a little bit. We don't have time to talk about it too much today, but it's really interesting to me now that we have this kind of data that everyone on Windows Phone fan sites has been batting around and saying, well, we just need to get the numbers for this quarter and let's see what it is. And I agree, Tony. I think the trend is really, really it has some potential. What do I want to say? I feel like the trend is encouraging, but and Brandon, you also make a good point. They have it is a substantial share, but it is still a diminutive one.
And something which needs to be also addressed, and I think people didn't quite see this coming, or at least I haven't read about this. Q3 will be crucial for Nokia because while being in Q2, Microsoft dropped the X, and they told everybody that current Windows phones, including Nokia's, will not get Windows Phone 8. And that's why I'm saying Q3 is going to be crucial for Nokia, because it's going to be that quarter in which they will realize that people do or do not care about updates. If their sales are stagnant or they're going up, then people do not care about updates and they care about good hardware, which Nokia is also the best hardware, which I've seen for a long time. If sales go down, then I think Microsoft and Nokia have a problem which they need to solve ASAP, because if sales are dropping again, it will be pretty difficult for them to rise them up again above the sea level, if I may, in Q4 before the holidays when Windows Phone 8 is going to come out.
And that's a really good segue, because we have this other story where the Windows Phone 8 RTM is rumored for a November or a September or November debut. We have like a couple conflicting rumors here, I feel like, and Tony, you wrote this one as well, where it's like, we heard September or November, but Stephen Elop said that Lumia sales were going to get a boost by Windows Phone 8 coming in October. So it's like, what's going on here?
I'm not the person who questions Mary Jo Foley's sources. Everybody's got their sources. The sources might be right or might be wrong. When RTM hits, it's not the important issue. The important issue is whether the Nokia-Microsoft relationship is that strong so that Microsoft could allow themselves to give Nokia a certain amount of time, say 2 weeks, 1 month in advance of other OEMs. So, for instance,
very likely,
if the RTM hits in November and we'll be seeing Nokia Windows Phone 8 in October, I think that will piss off other hardware makers like HTC and Samsung. And I'm not sure that Microsoft wants to do that. I'm not sure they want to lose any partners.
Sure, but what are they doing? I mean, what has HTC and Samsung done in the past 6 months with Windows Phone that's been at all interesting? Anything? I haven't seen it.
It's on which market? If you're talking about the U.S. market, then you have the Focus 2, you have the Titan 2, you have lots of great hardware which never ever made it to Europe. And
but yeah, I mean, it launched here, but nobody cared really. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it sat here. It wasn't pushed by AT&T. Certainly, the Titan 2 wasn't given the time of day by their advertising department compared to the Nokia push.
These companies were well aware that Windows Phone 8 would dramatically change the specifications for their hardware. So I don't think HTC wanted to make some groundbreaking product when they really couldn't. They can't make a high-res screen. They can't take advantage of multi-core processors. Nokia was really the only company that could innovate on the hardware, and they did it with just amazing hardware. And HTC and Samsung are probably waiting for Windows Phone 8 to show their stuff.
Right. So I guess my question is then, like, HTC and Samsung have released this stuff, like you're pointing out, Tony, and yeah, like Microsoft would probably really annoy them by giving Nokia a big head start with Windows Phone 8. But I guess my question is, do HTC and Samsung make enough of a difference to Windows Phone that they deserve to be that Microsoft should really heed that warning?
I think that depends. Just one sentence, Brandon. I think that depends on Microsoft, and I'm gonna say this: try to put yourself, for instance, in Peter Chow's shoes. If you are at CES and you're launching the Titan 2, and then you're starting preparing for an Android lineup, which is the 1X, the 1S, and the 1V, where do you spend your R&D money and all of your company efforts? In HTC 1X, which is probably going to sell millions, or in the HTC Titan 2, which is probably going to sell below 500,000 units?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. The HTC and the rest have to prioritize. To the previous point of giving Nokia an advantage, Microsoft has already done that, but it will not do that to the significant detriment of its partners, because if Windows Phone cannot exist in a world where Nokia has failed and where HTC and Samsung and LG and whomever else make Windows Phone hardware are mad at Microsoft and don't want to make hardware because Microsoft has spited them. So it's very much in the interest of Microsoft to keep these companies happy.
But I think, sorry, go on.
I just think that that is true in the world that we have seen so far. But we have seen a very different Microsoft, especially with this Surface stuff, where they've taken the manufacturing of the Surface in-house. And I think their partnership with Lumia with Nokia is very important to them. And I wonder if we'll see some Microsoft-sourced Windows Phone 8 hardware maybe sooner than we think, and whether this kind of thing where they have to dance, they have to tiptoe around HTC and Samsung might not be the case for much longer. I'm just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall here.
If your name is HTC or Samsung, and for instance, you are losing Microsoft as a partner, and you're losing those units which you are selling, you are entitled to say a big meh, because you have all the Android phones which are selling millions. But if your name is Nokia and you're losing Microsoft, or you're losing Microsoft's market share, then you're really gonna die, because Nokia doesn't really have a backup plan. Even though Steven Elop says they do have a backup plan, Migo, they abandoned it. Symbian is dead. So it's either Windows Phone all the way for Nokia or nothing else. But HTC and Samsung can easily live without Microsoft and Windows Phone, because as long as they sell millions of Android phones, which are good, then they don't have a problem.
Good call. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what goes on with that. I want to keep a close eye on. We're obviously going to keep a close eye on Nokia, but personally, I'm very interested in seeing what they do. That's if we can move on to iOS real quickly. There's really not much. There's always something going on in the iOS world, but what nano SIMs allegedly confirmed for iOS 5. This is an interesting story. I really hope this is not the case.
As a chronic phone switcher, I hope that it's not the case. But Michael, have you ever cut a SIM to a micro SIM size?
That's the thing. I had to run all over town because I didn't have a SIM cutter at the time to do this review for some phone that I forgot. And I had to put my micro SIM into an adapter and all that stuff. And it was just such an enormous pain. So, yes, I have done that, but it was annoying, yes.
When I don't have a SIM cutter, I just get wire cutters. And it's a little risky, and I've actually messed it up a time or two. You can actually just cut it with scissors, and you just got. It doesn't have to be the exact shape. Like, you can have a half a millimeter off, and it will still work. And what also is kind of cool is that if you're using a phone that has regular SIM and you have cut your SIM into a micro, you can finagle it to properly line up with the gold contacts. Contacts, yes. With nano SIM, that will still be possible, but the occurrences of people accidentally slicing off one of the gold contacts in an attempt to get a nano size is going to increase. But I
will not be able to do that, because the nano SIM is 40% smaller than the micro SIM itself. So while the micro SIM contains only the chip part of the normal SIM, the nano SIM will be even smaller than the chip itself on the micro SIM. Wow.
I don't think that's right. I think the nano SIM it has the same size contacts, but it completely removes all of the white stuff. And the white stuff is still there on the micro SIM, a little bit of it, like a millimeter border. And I think the nano SIM just takes away that millimeter border.
That's fascinating. I don't know. I was burned. I had a review unit that I had to do that micro SIM into SIM, sort of this faux adapter thing where I put it into the spent shell of another SIM. And there was tape involved, and it was very, very, it was very back alley, like chop shop kind of stuff. And then I had a real hard time getting that SIM out of the review phone when it came time to send it back to the manufacturer. So any new standard that comes out where it's like, yeah, we're gonna change SIMs again for the second time in 2 years, when it hadn't changed for 15 years before that, I'm annoyed by and just kind of reflexively opposed to, in this uncharacteristically afraid of change way, like the grandfather on the porch. Dang old technology, give me my newspaper and whatever. I just want one SIM standard, and if that's nano SIMs, fine, then just make it happen overnight, please. I'm really tired of this already.
Forget that we are evolving, and the way we have evolved from normal SD cards to mini SD and then to micro SD is just normal that at one point we'll get smaller and smaller SIM cards, and SSD drives have become smaller and smaller up until a moment where they solder it to the motherboard. So the trend in technology is to have smaller sized, larger capacity chips, and I'm not sure there's going to be anything else after nano SIM, but the trend is definitely to go smaller and smaller.
Please, no embedded SIMs. Please, no.
Oh, God, Sprint is already doing that, and it's so irritating.
It's the worst. It's just... Well, it's fine for people that use a phone for 2 years, but for those of us that switch phones like we switch underwear, it's not.
Buy unlocked, my friends. Do it the European way.
No, because then it's very difficult to get an unlocked device that can support LTE here, or that has the proper bands and stuff. Usually, the unlocked ones are the HSPA ones that are quad core.
Jerk now.
What's that?
Can I be a jerk now?
Please be a jerk now.
That's your problem.
Well said. Well said, jerk. Speaking of standards and iOS, Apple is going to move to a 19-pin connector. Kind of everybody is aware of this. That the smaller dock connector is basically a lock for the new iPhone. We've talked about this. We've touched on this briefly. We don't really have to talk about this. I just wanted to mention it. Apple's going to make a killing on accessory adapters.
Yeah, there you go.
If you were
new business model.
Exactly. If you were ever thinking of a time to get into the accessory business, 2 months ago was the time, and you should have started making these adapters, because it's going to be incredible how much money is spent just to make existing hardware work with this new connector.
They'll probably most likely include an adapter for free. I think. I don't know. That doesn't seem like something they would do, but it seems like the right thing to do.
It does.
It's just funny that Daniel Webster, who is on our staff, and he asked me. That was back in 2011, I think towards August or September, to somehow get him 2 adapters from the normal 40-pin connector on the iPhone to micro USB, because he wants to charge via micro USB. And I looked in Hungary, I looked in Belgium, I looked in Spain, and I finally found 2 adapters this year when I was in London for the Galaxy S3 event, and I sent it to him, but now he's going to be all over me for another adapter.
Yeah, that's a part that I don't think many people know exists. It's a micro USB to
30-pin.
30-pin, yeah. That's a very handy thing.
But that's only available in Europe. We have to mention this because the European Commission came out with a law, if I may use this layman term, a directive in which the standard for Europe as far as charging is concerned is micro USB. So everybody has to align with that, and Apple had to align with that by producing an adapter.
Right. And I'm glad that happened. I mean, there are policy arguments to be made on either side of that, but there's a really powerful case to be made for standards, particularly when it's something as integral as charging. And we did something sort of similar in the States here, but it wasn't as, I feel like it was a couple years ago, but it wasn't as far-reaching as the UK solution. So it was like, micro USB sort of became a standard as a result of, I guess, market forces here more than anything legal.
Right.
But I'm glad that it did, because it's really nice to be able to be out with friends or whatever. It's like, wow, my phone is dying and I really need to borrow your charger. 9 times out of 10 it's going to work.
Yeah, it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
But this also calls for another discussion, another topic on battery charging, battery capacity. You cannot charge every battery with any charger. It has to be a certain amount of current, a certain amount of amperage, which goes through the battery. So I think this should be a topic for another podcast.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Yeah, because the Atrix HD in particular, which I've been using recently, it has a very, very peculiar taste in what current it will accept. But we should talk about that in another one. As a matter of fact, I've just made a note about it, magically. Let's see, really quick as we start to wind down the podcast here, we had a piece called 5 Things You Didn't Know About Pocketnow. Brandon wrote it recently, a couple days ago. It was a really cool piece. I haven't seen really anything like it in the tech space, at least not recently. And Brandon, just briefly, can you tell us how the idea came about to post that piece? Because there were a lot of comments on it, and there still are.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence about it, and I was passing it around to a bunch of you guys, trying to get your opinion. And some people said, "Yeah, post it." Some people said, "Nah, people don't care. They don't. They don't necessarily."
That's me.
Want to know. Right. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of energy and resources that goes into Pocketnow, and I don't think people fully realize that. I mean, it's a site, and there's pictures, and there's text, but all of it occurs with a very not very complex, but rather complex system that involves multiple systems and lots of communication. And then there's this whole business aspect of it, which, it's almost a little dirty to talk about it, but I'm happy to talk about it. And Pocketnow is made possible by ads. We've got a fair amount of full-time staff that need to eat, and I need to eat, and we've got contractors that need to get paid, and we've got ad revenue that supports it all. And the ad revenue bit is interesting because I think people don't understand exactly how ad revenue works. And the way it works is that it's impression based, and it's the same way it is in your name your favorite magazine or newspaper. It doesn't matter if you click on an ad. It kind of does matter, but for all intents and I hate that phrase. And for all intents and purposes, it doesn't matter. What it matters is how many impressions there are. So every time you load a page on Pocketnow, you see 3 ads. You generated 3 ad impressions. And our key metric to optimize is maximizing the number of ad impressions. Should we want to stay sustainable as a business? And so I wrote this article kind of explaining this, and fortunately people appreciated it as a kind of behind the scenes of how does this all happen, and the article goes on to explain how it happens. So I'm glad it was well received, and I really hope people appreciated the background.
And I think they did. And I just checked the comments on it before we came on the air today, and it really there was a lot of kind of gratitude. There was a lot of open speculation about stuff, discussion topics that were raised by the things that you talked about. And I personally would like to see more of it. And I've been batting around a couple ideas in that vein. So we may see more of that in the future if I or anyone else on the team can come up with something more, something as interesting. The other thing that it was on MISC I don't really want to talk about. Hey, there's a new BlackBerry Playbook that might be coming out. How excited are you guys?
Nah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Never. No, actually, that's too cruel. There are things about the playbook I like, and I would like to snap one up, but we'll talk about it on another podcast. I want to jump into 2 minutes. I don't want to do as much of a debate this week. There's not a lot that we want to debate about at the moment. This week, I have an interesting question. We featured another story, kind of a behind-the-scenes thing about what we carry on the Pocketnow team, what our daily drivers are. It was called, Here's What Devices Pocketnow Staff Are Using. And I noticed as I looked at this article, which I contributed to, as we all did, we all, almost without exception, carry phones on the top 3 platforms. And that's to be expected. We're a smartphone site. I mean, and the top 3 platforms are iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. My question to you, gentlemen, which will constitute our 2 minutes apiece bit today, is if you had to carry a smartphone that was not on one of the top 3 platforms, what platform would you choose? If you want, you can say what phone would you choose and why.
Oh, let me start.
Okay, Brandon, you may start. You have 2 minutes. Go. Okay,
this is going to be kind of disgusting, but I would use the Pixie Plus.
Nice.
Because there's a lot I don't like about the Pixie Plus, but there's a lot I do like about it. For example, it works with Microsoft Exchange, which is the sort of email that I use. And most importantly, it has such a cute form factor. The keyboard, just for me, has the perfect amount of click that it is tremendously satisfying on. I used it for a month. Back in the day when I was reviewing it on Sprint. And, it had slow data speeds, there are all these problems, but I was a bandit typing with the Pixie Plus. It was a little slow, but it generally kept up. It got all of my email. It had the apps that I needed. And it just fit in my pocket like there was nothing there. And it just felt like this little mini powerhouse that no one really liked, but, I had a fling with it, to be honest. So Pixie Plus for me.
Listeners, Brandon and I just became best friends. You have borne witness to a paradigm shift in the Pocketnow team. That's wonderful. I never would have in a million years expected you to say any WebOS device, but least of all a Pixie Plus. Good for you, sir, or a Pixie, or a Pixie. Greetings, mobile accomplishers. Nicely done. Tony.
As mentioned, I'm going to be very short because this is very easy for me. As mentioned in my here's what devices Pocketnow staff are using, I am currently using the Nokia 808 PureView as one of my daily drivers. I have 2 mobile numbers, so I'm doomed to always carry 2 phones with me. But right now, one of them is the Nokia 808 PureView because, well, go on, read the review, and you'll find out why. But I need to tell you this. I absolutely love the phone. And it's not only because of the camera. The camera is an important feature of the phone, but Nokia Bell, ex-Symbian Bell, is very usable. It has, it shines through the relationship between Nokia and Microsoft. There's not only full Exchange support, which I'm always glad to see because I'm using Exchange, but there's also SharePoint, there's Link, there's Excel, Word, Office, OneNote, so everything you need to be productive. That, plus, of course, the free Nokia services for maps and the voice-guided navigation, which is fully offline and fully free, those make up for a great decision. As far as I'm concerned, I'm happy with the 808 PureView. It's got great, exceptional build quality, but if you want to find out more, just go on to pocketnow.com, read the entire review, and you'll find out.
With a plug at the end, very nicely done, sir. I have to confess, I sort of anticipated your response because I had read your review just before we came on the air, which is a great review, and I agree with Tony. You should hop on and read it, listeners. It's a really, really great, comprehensive review of that phone. My response will be very similarly brief and unsurprising to anyone who knows me. My platform of choice would be WebOS, even in spite of its current state of disrepair. The march to open WebOS is a long one, but I would carry the Pre-3 because when I received it, when I bought it right after the WebOS collapse and the prices kind of skyrocketed, I nabbed one very quickly. And when I unboxed it, I will always remember I wasn't working for a tech site, and I wish I were because I would have just done a whole day of unboxing videos and review videos, and I was so in love with the phone because it was everything that everyone on WebOS had always wanted, and it came about just about a month too late.
Hey, to that point, I don't know if you know this, Michael, and this, I guess, will be probably the final bit because we have to wrap up. Open WebOS happens like this year or early next year, right, where the source code's released.
Correct.
And I was watching a podcast, I think, or some sort of a video from WebOS Nation, and they were mentioning, and I didn't know this, but if it's true, I'm gonna jump onto the ceiling, that Open WebOS will have support for ARM devices and will thus be portable to Android phones.
Yes, Open WebOS throws away the custom WebOS kernel that they were Linux kernel that they were using and switches to a more standard Linux kernel. So yes, that should be the drivers should be able to support that.
Wow.
Yeah. Believe me, I mean, I already have like 3 or 4 videos and written pieces just ready to go for when Open WebOS becomes a thing, and I really hope it doesn't fall off the rails.
Do you guys remember that news post? It was, I think, just about the time when WebOS got killed by HP, that one of the early devices, and I think it was the touchpad, one of either pre-production prototypes, shipped with Android on board.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of your question, Brandon. We will be at one point able to run WebOS on the Samsung Galaxy S3.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to running it on a host of devices. But you're right, Brandon. We do have to wrap up, and I could talk about WebOS forever, but we won't. In the future, though, we will. I want to talk about it for a long time when it becomes relevant again. Marginally so. I want to wrap up this week with a piece of listener mail. This is awesome. It's not our first piece of listener mail, but it's the first one that asked us for some questions. So let's just get right to it. This is from Daniel. Daniel, I'm going to butcher your last name like I do to Tony every week. I'm sorry. I believe it's Daniel Baldioseda? Baldioseda. He says, hey there, I've been a big follower of Pocketnow for a couple of years now. Wanted to tell you that I really liked and enjoyed the first episode of Pocketnow Weekly. Thank you very much, sir. I'm from Costa Rica, and I have 2 main questions for you. Maybe you can even answer them on your next podcast. I am really interested in getting a Nexus 7 tablet, but the Google Play Store just won't let me because they're not available here. So do you think they will be available in sites such as Amazon or any site like it? I mean, I definitely think so personally. Gentlemen, you probably know more about this than I, but I would think that would be a foregone conclusion, yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Galaxy Nexus, well, that's, I guess, a different scenario. But yeah, I think it'll eventually be on Amazon. And if you want one right now, just go to eBay. And you might pay a little bit of a premium, but if you wait until all the stock is back in availability, maybe a month from now, you'll probably get have to pay a slight premium on eBay, but not by that much.
Plus, there are those third-party retailers, e-tailers, like our good friends in the UK, Clove and Negri Electronics. Those guys should have stock soon, so
Yep.
you should be well covered.
Yep.
Yeah. I think you'll have more than a few options, Daniel. There. And I have to tell you, I love mine so far. Brandon, of course, did the official review. You can consult that. But I really, it's hard for me not to recommend this device to people, even after a couple days. But I'm keeping my mouth shut until I get past the initial glow. Daniel, you had a second question. I own a Galaxy S2, the i9100G. Do you think that Jelly Bean is going to be available for S2 devices anytime soon? And we just discussed that earlier on the podcast. It looks like that is going to be the case pretty soon.
Daniel, listen to me. Be a man. Go to your favorite development site, root your phone, and get Jelly Bean on it today. It'll be stable as the phone app will work, and you'll get Jelly Bean today. Just do it.
I love it.
One word of warning, though, it's the 9100G, if I understood well. That's slightly different from the 9100, which is the international version. You have to check whether it's compatible with ROMs out there, so be on the safe side and do diligence, read the feedback.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think we've just decided that Brandon Miniman should have a recurring column called "Be a Man."
Yes, please allow me to do that.
That's awesome. And Daniel's kind of snuck in a bonus question here. Can you tell me where Jaime Rivera is from? His accent sounds very much like mine speaking English. Ha ha. I am going to get this right this week. Jaime is from Honduras, or at least he lives there now. He's from there originally, right, gentlemen?
Yep.
Cool. Daniel, there are your answers. Thank you so much for writing in. We really appreciate it. Yeah, and thanks for being our first piece of listener mail read on the air. Gentlemen, unless you have anything else, that wraps it up for this episode of the Pocketnow Weekly. I'm Michael Fisher. You can find me on the Twitter sphere at Captain2Phones. That's Captain, the number 2, Phones. Brandon Miniman is at Brandon Miniman, and Tony over there is at Anton D. Nagy. That's ANTONDNAGY. You can follow Pocketnow's official Twitter account at PocketNowTweets. Leave us a review on iTunes or Zune if you like the podcast. And if you have a topic, if you have a question, you have a suggestion for the podcast, or you just want to say hi, follow Daniel's example. Email us at podcast@pocketnow.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next week.
Good being here.
See ya.